is the 2010 Police Annual Report. I'm going to start off really pretty general and get down to some specifics. Okay, that's the overall budget for the police department comparing last year and the year before. You can see it's gone down a little. I think my math put it around 66,000. Also noteworthy is the capital outlay. That almost $70,000 was a federal grant that we received in 2009. We were able to purchase 2 patrol cars with that. And last year that grant wasn't out there, so we didn't have a lot coming in at there. As I said, it is a little bit smaller than 2009. 2011 was a little smaller than 2010. It's kind of a trend. Yeah, one that it's not going to, hopefully that doesn't happen too often, was just expenditures. And although we had the budget, we actually came in under budget for last year. And that's generally what happens in the police department. Now, the grant funding page is probably one of the most important ones here. And if you look at the first one, it's the third one down, the Department of Justice Law Enforcement Grant, an amount of $181,000. That actually paid the salaries for 2 officers. One's the school resource officer, who's assigned to the high school, but he works in the other schools as well. And the other one's our crime prevention officer. And important note here is that those grants both expire at the end of this year. So we'll spend the rest of the year trying to find an alternate funding for those 2 positions, so don't be gone. The one directly below it, the COPS grant, at $76,000, was a 3-year grant, and it provides funding for 1 patrolman. Now, again, it'll be expiring at the end of next year, so we'll be looking for more funding in the years to come. And the third one down, or the fourth one, third one, Drug Task Force Officer, and that's another grant, amount of $78,000. And that covers 3/4 of the salary for a drug enforcement officer who's assigned to the WestNet Drug Task Force, which is located in Kitsap County. And that's ongoing. Haven't heard any talk of it expired. Another thing I'd like to point out is the DUI Traffic Safety Coordinator grant at $35,000. It's actually just been changed to the one at the bottom. It's the same funding amount. They just changed the name. And something else that was important, the reserve officer donations. That $2,000 actually came from the Police Guild, and it helped fund our Reserve Officer Academy that started up late last year and finished early this year. Calls for service, and it's interesting, a lot of these remain fairly steady. If you look at some of the more busier areas of town, you see that downtown totals for both years we're only 50 calls off. It's real consistent with the amount of calls that come in. Hillcrest up there is another busy place. Not too far off, a couple hundred calls. And Mountain View is really busy too, with 3,800 calls last year. And also for consistency, if we look at the 2 years, we're just a few off. And interesting, I think it finally plateaued out since about 2005. I think we had 14,000 calls. And each year since then, it's dropped off close to 1,000. And this is the first time it's leveled out. So I think we're at a constant now, unless it starts going back up. These are the serious crimes that occur in the city. We report to the FBI every month, uniform crime reporting. And these are the ones that we report to them. And they're the main, the serious crimes are at the top, the violent crimes. The felony assaults are staying relatively the same. Fortunately, no homicides. Sex offenses are close. And the other past years, they were similar. The odd thing here is the robbery. That's actually up 171%. And all I can attribute that to is the economy. This year so far, they're lower for the quarter. So hopefully, I've got some charts that will show it a little clearer to you along a little further. But then under the property crimes, arson, that's also a huge jump. But interesting enough, 3 of those arsons were at the same residence on the same 24-hour period. They were targeted. So it should have been actually probably 3. The other large increase, vehicle thefts. I think they're actually at 31%. And unfortunately, a lot of those cars that are stolen are left outside during the winter months to warm up. It's really a bad idea. But probably half of them were taken that way. Most of them were recovered, but not always in the shape they left, unfortunately. And that's just a comparison to what's been stolen and recovered. Again, fairly consistent year after year. I think we're going to get to some graphs. There's the arson graph, which I think, better than just the numbers, just points out that we have been higher than 5, but clearly in 2009 they were 0. So that increase in 2010 was really an isolated problem with that one residence that was targeted. I'm sure it'll drop off again next year. Burglary, although the numbers sound high, I think there was about 170 burglaries last year. From 2005, you can see the general decline, which is a good thing. Went up a little bit in 2007, but the decline since 2005 has maintained itself. And that classification of serious assaults appears to just be slowly increasing over the last 9 years. A trend that I can't fully explain, but the last few years it seems to have, although it's increasing, not quite as aggressively. And vehicle theft. As I mentioned, it went up 31% last year, which is fairly significant, but since 2004 it's been on the decline, so it's positive. And theft, which of course part of our strategic plan is to reduce that by 20% over a few years, is steadily declining. So we're doing what we set out to do there. Sex crimes, again, they were tapering off until it's like 2007. Increase over 2 years, and now they're declining again. But the numbers do remain within a very small window there. And that's the one on robbery, since it has the highest increase. But it definitely did do a drop-off there in 2006. And the increase for the last 2 years is pretty obvious. But this year, the first quarter, they are down compared to what the first quarter of last year showed. And then for patrol activities, I've got several of their major things that they respond to. Accidents, they're remaining fairly constant. Actually, under all those accidents, they dropped down a little bit from 2009 to 2010, except for the bicyclists, and that was only an increase of 1, so it's not very significant. And as in most years, the most common cause of the accident is failure to yield and following too close. That's been consistent most years. Continuing with patrol activity, we get into the citations issued, and they're fairly consistent both in non-traffic and traffic. Infraction, non-traffic have gone down about 50%. Those are mostly animal calls and dog licensing. The reason for that is Officer Dunlap retired at mid-year, so we expect those to drop off. Total infractions are real consistent, and then again, parking, huge drop there, but that's due to our parking enforcement officer who retired around mid-year. And the most common infraction, as in most years, is speeding. This is another important slide, I think, on revenue. The one that's, all the things remain, again, fairly constant. The one thing that is noteworthy was about halfway down in forfeitures. That was a drug seizure of about $27,000. We have another one pending this year. It's about 14, but it won't show up until, it was from last year, but it doesn't show because we haven't had the hearing yet. It could be on next year's report. And detective division, and again, when I mentioned the consistency, I found it really odd over the years how we can get the same numbers. And the cases, they're all felony cases that are referred to them. And for 2 years in a row, they were exactly the same. And that's, it runs between about 400 and 500. Third, a few more with the rest. In 2010, up to 86 from 60. Total cases cleared, remained about the same. Again, no homicides, that's good. But out of those 17 robberies, 14 were referred to our 2 detectives to follow up on. Felony assaults, same numbers both years. Burglaries are up just slightly from 2009. Auto thefts up considerably, and again, it's most of the cars taken. It's just that opportunity that's there. Leave the car for 5 minutes, warming up, it'll be gone when we come out. Drug enforcement, as I mentioned, we do have a drug task force. They handle most of the sales, and their stats don't show here. So we don't have a lot there, although the methamphetamine has a pretty good jump from 1 case to 7. We'll have more activity when we get to possession. And interesting under that is the change in the possession of heroin cases. We're seeing that over the last couple of years. Actually, marijuana is up considerably, and so is meth. And pills. But these are typically handled at the patrol level. It wouldn't be our detectives, and it wouldn't be the